And we're live. Hey, Serena. How are
Hi,
you?
Catherine.
We're laughing because we're like, we're going to pretend like we haven't seen each other a ton in the last 24 hours.
In the last 2 weeks, I feel like
I
actually we've gotten a lot of in-person time too.
I know we shared a house at camp and we went on all the rides together at camp. And then yesterday we had a bunch of meetings about our winter training, and then we did an Oregon Trail prep meeting that you about your new training plan. So we've been spending a lot of time together. It's
Yeah, and
been great.
we're still friends.
Yeah,
So I think we passed that test.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you what I asked you last night when we started our group call, because you got to come to our mechanic camp for the first time and you led our rides, which was really fun. You taught people to ride through sand and do lots of descend Mount Lemon and lots of cool stuff. And you got to see some of the mechanic camp. Like, you've done a lot of things in your time. What did you think was unique about that camp?
I loved the hands-on nature of the camp. Both on the mechanic side and then also watching the women on their bikes and learning new skills. It was just very much interactive, and I think their brains were working so hard, learning new things and challenging themselves, and that was really freaking cool. And I really loved the way that you've set up the mechanics camp so that people are working on their own bikes. It's not this arbitrary, like, this is how you fix something. It's this is how you work on your bike. So really hands-on learning that is really applicable when they go home. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was really, really cool to be a part of and so fun to watch. Um,
Yeah.
all the
Sorry, I
growth.
decided I didn't like that view of us, so I changed the
Oh,
layout
hmm,
so we could be bigger.
okay.
So if you're not watching on YouTube and you're like, "What?" The platform we use, you can change the view, and I didn't like our view. But yes, I loved that part of where people get to really work on their bike, and I always try to say it's so different than a clinic that you go to where maybe you learn to plug a tire. You're, like, learning how everything within the tire system works. So when you go to plug your tire, you don't, you know, pierce your rim tape or something like that. Because if you do, you have to fix it.
Yeah. I mean, so much of life and cycling is all about problem solving. And if you understand how a system works, you can so much better solve a problem when it arises. So, yeah, it's like really digging in there, getting to the root of the systems and then building it up from there. It's really, really cool.
Yeah. Well, I keep forgetting when I go live, I have to introduce the guest like up front because we don't do an
Oh, yeah.
intro into those anymore.
Yeah.
So I do have joining me today Serena Bishop Gordon, who is the founder of Special Blend Gravel. So she coaches individuals, she writes training plans, and then also hosts the Special Blend Gravel camps, which are kind of writing and skills camps that you do a lot for women, but you have some co-ed camps as well. And you're working toward that kind of person in the middle. So not the beginner and not the most advanced rider necessarily either at your camps. And
Mhm.
then you joined us to be the head coach of our winter training program this year. So we're in our last month of that, and we're planning to bring it back next year, and we're scheming other things. So we've been talking all this amazing information within our winter training group. And I'm like, we need to take this beyond the like 120 women in that group and talk about some of these things. Cause I know a lot of people they're either into training or they're like, oh crap, should I have been training? Because now the weather's starting to get nice, events are coming. So I thought we'd do some myth busters and then some questions that we've seen come up a lot within our training group. And it's really more of like I picked Serena's brain on training and probably throw in my 2 cents worth here and there. So
Perfect.
does that sound good to you, Serena?
That sounds great. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so my first myth that I was going to bring up, because I hear this a ton, is people only train if they want to compete at a race.
Hmm.
Is that true?
I don't think that's true. I think most people who train don't necessarily they do it because they want to challenge themselves. And competition can look different for all different people, but I think people can train for events, and whether you're competing or competing in an event, um, you can train for that. But you can also just train for going on a trip with your friends or having a big goal for the end of the summer. And so I think a training plan or a training philosophy that you can employ over the course of the season is super important. And you'll just get so much more out of yourself, and you'll be more prepared for the whatever challenges, whether it be an organized event or just, hey, I want to do this big long ride in August. You'll be more fit and you'll have more fun. And the fitter we are, the more prepared we are, the more we enjoy the experience. So, and I think there is an opportunity here to take a step back and say, what is training versus like what is riding and what is exercising? And when we talk about training, we're really talking about a progressive plan, meaning you're increasing volume and or intensity over the course of the season, and you are resting and recovering and getting stronger. Compared to riding or exercising, that might be like, oh, I ride, or I run for 45 minutes every day. That's great. That's awesome. There's nothing wrong with that. It's great for your health, but that's exercising. You aren't doing anything progressive. You're doing the same thing. And your body really becomes accustomed to responding to a 45-minute run or a 60-minute ride. And so by throwing different stimulus at it at different times in a thoughtful way, you are able to get stronger and more prepared. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And you
training's for everybody.
training for everybody. Yeah. And you take, I think the other big thing is like training. If you have a training plan, it forces you to take rest, which I think a lot of women that are in our winter training group have been surprised at how much they rest and how much fitter they're getting compared to what they've done
Mhm.
in the past.
Yeah, and I think that is a aha moment for a lot of people who are new to structured training. I recently coached this woman to a 30K trail run, the Daydreamer, down in Patagonia, and she's a cyclist and a runner. And I started working with her, and I was like, okay, we need to take 2 days off. And her eyes were like, wait, 2 days off every week? I don't take rest days. I don't take days off. And then she completed the race, and we have this debrief, and she was just like, I had no idea what would happen if I took rest. And you can see so much more improvement, um, and you can stair step your way to higher fitness versus just pounding yourself into the ground. So it is hard to rest. I actually find that that's the hardest part of most people's training plans is the rest days, and why I recommend people have a plan. Because if you have it on the schedule, if you have an interval session, you're not going to miss the interval session if it's written on your calendar. And if you have a rest day written on the calendar, you probably won't miss it either. So you need to rest as hard as you recover, or you need to rest and recover as hard as you train.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, let's talk about another myth. This is a big one. We've talked about this a lot in our winter training. So the myth is women should be doing a lot of zone two or women should be doing no zone two. We hear it both. And what does that even mean? Because here's the
What
thing.
does it
I
even
actually
mean?
meant to send you this. I listened to a really good podcast. You would totally nerd out over it about zone training, and that zone training was created so that we would have a common language, basically. But then everybody started creating their own version of zone training, so nobody has a common language about it anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. This is why everybody's so freaking confused. Because zone two, when you hear like somebody talking about it on a podcast, they may be talking about something completely different than your coach is talking about.
Right. And it's like, are you using a 5 zone system? Are you using a 3 zone system? Are you using a 7 zone system? When I speak about zone two, to me that's endurance. And cycling is an aerobic endurance sport. And so when we think about zone two and we think about the foundation of cycling, um, zone two is where you build your aerobic base. And so when I use endurance and zone two very interchangeably, whether or not that is technically correct or fits a definition, but with the athletes that I work with, that's how I speak of zone two. And there are ranges within zone two, but um, I think that it depends on your goals for training. If you want to do a 50-mile gravel race or a 100-mile mountain bike race or a 30-mile mixed terrain race, those are all very aerobic events. And therefore, before you can start doing high intensity, before you can start saying, I want to increase my VO2, you need to build a strong foundation of endurance and aerobic durability. And so I think when people say, well, I read that women, especially in middle age, shouldn't be doing zone two or shouldn't be doing endurance, my argument is, well, what are your goals and what are your events? And if your event requires aerobic fitness, which most cycling events do, we need to do some endurance work. We also need to do high end work, and so it's dependent on the time of season. It's dependent on your strengths and limiters. It's dependent on um, what the demands of your goal race are. But I think we need endurance work 100%, and we also need high end work. So that's where again a training plan comes in, because you can sprinkle in the high end stuff at different times in your training progression to get the adaptations that you need to then move on to the next step or be prepared for your event.
Yeah, and it's not one or the other. Like in your long endurance ride, you may be doing some hard interval,
Mhm,
a few hard
mhm,
intervals that you throw in there
mhm.
to break it up,
Yeah.
or some higher intensity riding, or because like when you're out in the real world, you're gonna be going up like some hill that you're like, oh my God, now my heart rate is like at the max
Mhm.
for the next 2 minutes because I'm going up this hill, or that's just real world riding.
And in the winter training program, our longer rides have started to sprinkle in tempo and sweet spot is a training zone just below your threshold. So it's requiring quite a lot of focus, but you can do a lot of it. Um, and the people in our winter training program have seen some of that higher end endurance work being sprinkled into their long rides. And I think it's surprisingly challenging. And what that does is it prepares you for that long climb, or when you're really fatigued at the end of the race and you are like, I don't know how I'm 25 miles from the finish. I don't know how I'm going to get there. And then you're like, oh, wait, but I've done this. I have worked really hard at the back end of the rate of a ride. And it also makes you focus on fueling, right? If you know I have a 40-minute block of tempo at the end of this ride, I better keep my gas tank full. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I have a funny story about that. We did a ride this past weekend. Well, one, we ended up on this section on this it was a really cool ride. You did lots of different things, but we ended up on this bike path for like probably 5 miles of it. And it was so windy, and so there was a woman with us on an e-bike, and I just got like I tried to stay in her draft. So I was looking down at my heart rate, and I was like, "Oh, yep, got that threshold here or
Mhm.
sub threshold." And then we got to kind of close to the end of the ride, and I told you it was really rainy. We were getting really cold. And just, I had enough nutrition, but I was like, my legs were feeling it. And so I was like, does anybody have a gel? So one of the guys shared a gel with me, and we were coming back down. We had 5 miles left, and it was like rocket fuel all of a sudden. And
Mm.
so it's like I finished out my ride with that same kind of one, because I was cold, and two, because all of a sudden I was like, I could have been an advertisement for goo today when that
Yeah.
gel hit, and I just took off.
Yeah, and remember that. I think
Yeah.
that actually, Catherine, is such a great point that you made. You had 5 miles left, and a lot of people would be like, "I only have 5 miles. I don't need to take a gel." And it's like, you not only felt good at the end of your ride because you took a gel, but you also started your recovery process because you weren't breaking your muscles down even more. So,
Yeah.
good job.
Like, thanks. Um, okay, so well, let's just talk about what should a good program look like, because there's a lot out there now. Like you can get free training plans. There
Mhm,
are a lot of things with AI, which we've talked a lot about the good and bad of AI. Just you and I, like, there's good that
mhm,
it makes things accessible
mhm,
to a lot of
mhm,
people, and there's the challenge of there's a lot of things that AI doesn't know about you, like
mhm,
your life input, your life stress, your hormone, where you are in
mhm.
your hormone cycle, your sleep, all those things. So what's a good how do we, if we're looking for a training plan, know if we're doing a quote unquote good one?
A good one. That's a great
Is it a
that's
good
a
one?
trick. I feel like that's a trick question.
That's an easy
Uh,
to see. Is it a good one?
um I think the first thing when you're looking at a training plan is you need to make sure that it's the expectation of time that you can give to a training plan is realistic with your life. And I say often, like, I can build the perfect training plan, but if it's not executable in your life, it's not the perfect training plan. So I would say first be very realistic about what is required in a plan and what amount of time you have to give to it. Um, and from there, I would step back and say, all right, does this plan meet the goals that I have? whether that be fitness, riding with your buddies, a specific race, or I just want to stay fit through the summer and you know, you don't necessarily have an event or a timeline, you just want to be fit. So the other piece I would say is if you're jumping into a training plan in April, have you done the work required to be prepared for that training plan? Most of the training plans are like, oh, 12 weeks to Leadville. Well, if you've been doing not a lot of riding and now you're doing a 12-week plan to get ready for the Leadville 100 mountain bike ride, it's probably going to be way more stress than you can take on. So be realistic about where your fitness level is coming into a plan. And as an example, we talked last night about the Oregon Trail training plan. It's a 16-week program that kicks off at the end of March. And in order, when I'm talking about this plan, I'm encouraging people, depending on if they're doing the short or long one, this is how many hours you should be riding per week as we enter the beginning of this plan. This is what your long ride should look like as we enter into this plan so that your body can actually absorb the work. And so that would be the other thing. It's just like, where are you fitness wise and what are the demands of that plan as you look towards it? I also think that a lot of training and a lot of training plans are based off of 27-year-old men.
Oh, that's so shocking that the default is a 20-something-year-old man. I
um,
would have never guessed that. That
yeah,
hasn't ever happened in women's physiology before.
right. Um, and so I would be cautious if you look at a plan and it has 4 really hard workouts on it and 1 rest day and 1 long ride day, like that you may need more rest. And if you get into a plan and you're like, "Wow, I am very fatigued and the plan says I should be able to do this," take a step back and say, "Who wrote the plan? Do they know me? Do they know what's going on in my life?" And we are busy people. I don't have kids and my life is busy. I can't even imagine how many moms out there are juggling work, family, children, friends, relationships, and then all the stuff that just, your dog gets sick or the water heater breaks or you've got to take a work trip. Life happens. And so being flexible with any plan is really important. Um, and we talked about this a little bit last night, but if you're like, okay, I've got a trip coming up and I'm only going to ride 3 days this week, or I can ride 2 days this week, or whatever it looks like, think about what are the priority rides in that week and really think about I'm gonna throw the rest of them out and I'm just gonna do the few key priority workouts um, that make sense for my schedule. So I don't think there's a right plan. I think each person needs to think critically about what their goals are, what their time allowance is, and what how they can make adjustments to any plan.
Yeah, and also just understanding some is better than nothing. Some week like the week we went to Arizona and I was like, "Oh," I kinda looked at the schedule, I was like, "I'm gonna be really busy with setup the first 3 days we're down there, so I don't think I'm gonna get to ride." And I was flying out that morning, and I was like, "I can't do the full workout." Like, Serena's written, like, an hour and 35-minute workout for this today. I don't have that time, but I could do
Yeah,
30 minutes, And so, like, I just found something on Zwift that
yeah,
was kinda like a similar stimulus,
yeah,
but shortened, stuff, and I was like, I got in a 30-minute ride. That was
yeah,
that fit my lifestyle, and instead of
yeah.
like, we get so, stuck sometimes on, like, if I don't do it all, I'm failing, or I'm not gonna get fit if I
Mhm,
don't do it
mhm,
perfectly, and I
mhm.
think that was another one of my questions for you is just like, how do you manage, uh, that mental part of, like, many of us wanna be perfect.
Hmm. Well, we aren't, and we are never going to be, and we're not robots. And I don't care how many supplements or how many sleep trackers or other data input things. You are not a robot. You're a human, and you could do everything exactly the same every day, and you're going to feel differently. So, giving yourself the grace to understand that we aren't perfect, we're not going to be perfect, and the purpose of training is not perfection. The purpose of training is progress. So, to your point, you got in 30 minutes. Well, if you said every time you said, I don't have time to do the full workout, maybe that's two times a week. So then you did zero. Well, if you do 30 minutes 2 times a week, that's a whole hour. And over the course of the month, that's 4 hours that you otherwise wouldn't have ridden. And I think we often we have all of these data inputs and I'm guilty of it. I write training plans that are built workouts and it says, these are the zones, these are the power targets or the heart rate zone you should be hitting. And these are the intervals to the second. Well, if you do a 3 minute and 45-second interval, or you do a 4 minute interval, it's not that different. Your body isn't like, oh my gosh, that was worthless because it was only 3 minutes and 45 seconds. And I think the more you understand that your body isn't robotic, and that joke of like, if it's not on Strava, it didn't happen. It happened. Your body knows it happened. You did the work. And I bring that up because like I love doing my intervals outside versus on the trainer. And I this winter especially have not been forced inside very much. So say I'm doing VO2 efforts and the hill that I've chosen, oh, I get to the top faster than I thought. So it was shorter, the interval was shorter than prescribed. Well, I still did really hard work. And maybe last week when I did that, I got to the top. So what's that telling me? Oh, I'm actually faster. Or something happened. I got up here faster. So trying to be a little bit flexible with your training and recognizing like what's the point or the goal of the workout, and then trying to stick to that versus thinking you have to nail everything exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I coached, one of the secrets that most athletes didn't understand is most coaches have the expectation you're going to be able to do about 80% of a plan. Because, like, as a coach, you just know life is busy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I see some people joining. So if anybody has a question about training for Serena, feel free to drop it in the comments. We will find those. But you talked about, measuring workouts. And so there's a lot of, especially if people are newer to training, or maybe they don't have all the fancy tools, maybe they don't have a power meter, they don't have some kind of indoor training. What are different ways you can measure progress or measure how you're doing within a workout?
Mm-hmm. So I would say the very first thing is, how do you feel? We've lost touch with how our bodies feel. And if you ride the same hill every day, or every time you go out for a ride, or every long ride, and all of a sudden it's feeling easier and you're getting to the top faster, that's an indicator that, wow, I'm getting fitter. And that's really powerful. And that's not something that we can measure necessarily. But it, I think, is one of the most important things, because the way that we feel on our bike also is huge motivation or demotivation. And when you can feel yourself getting faster, when you feel yourself um, climbing stronger, you know it. It's really powerful. Um, but then we also have a lot of other tools that can help us get there. So power meters are amazing, and a great training tool. And depending on the workout, you can measure progress, because last week you did 3x10 at X power and it was really hard. And this week you did it at that power and it wasn't nearly as hard. So what are you going to do next week? You're going to bump that power up, right? So you're using power as a way to, and your rate of perceived exertion as a way to say, oh, it's time to bump things up. And I like to say it never gets easier, you just go faster. So if a workout feels easy and it's supposed to feel a little harder, it's time to increase the effort, the power. If you're using heart rate, um, increasing your heart rate is not always the way that you measure progress. It's really how fast do you go at X heart rate? How what's your heart rate on a climb? What's your heart rate over the course of a 3-hour endurance ride? And is your heart rate stabilizing, or is it continuing to increase over that 3 hours? And so one of the things that I like to do, again, is just the most rudimentary, but pick a climb as one that's repeatable near your house, and ride up it as fast as you can in February, and then ride up it as fast as you can in June, and then ride up it as fast as you can in August, and see how fast you go up. And yeah, there are a lot of other variables, wind speed and weather and blah, blah, blah. But it is, if you think back to how people trained for cycling before we had all these gadgets, that's kind of what they did. And I think it's a very real way to measure success that doesn't require any sort of gadgetry.
Yeah. Yeah. And a power meter sometimes can sound intimidating on a bike. Like, I don't train with a power meter
Mhm.
on my bike anymore, but I do train with like Zwift and my smart trainer in the winter. I know you love to ride outside. I typically don't have the time during the week to do my workouts outside. So I try to do
Mhm.
my
Yeah.
weekend workouts outside, but it's nice because then I'm like, okay, I kind of feel what this power feels like and I can feel what's comparable to that on the
Mhm.
outside. So, like
Mhm.
there are lots of ways up the hill if you're like trying to add some of those metrics into your life.
Yeah.
Um, okay, well, let's talk about that. So you talked a little bit about one way to do a baseline is just like go out and ride something that's familiar and see if you can ride it faster. But then there's all these other baseline things we hear about. So FTP test, I know you don't like to use the word. You like to sneak it in as a baseline, but it's really an
You can
FTP
call it a
test.
test. It's okay.
And there's like lots of people have lots of different opinions on how you should do
Mhm.
this, but like what do you find is the most reliable and what does that mean to do an FTP test?
So
What
FTP,
does FTP mean?
yeah, FTP means functional threshold power. And a lot of people think it defines you as a cyclist or how strong or fast you are. And while FTP does have bearing on how fast you can travel and how much power you can put out, it's really an anchor point that helps us set our training zones. So the idea behind it, functional threshold power, would be if you were to ride for 1 hour as hard as you could, what would the power be? Would the average power be? And that would be like you cross the 60-minute mark and you're lying on the floor, unable to pedal anymore. Well, unless you're doing the hour record, I don't advise that anyone goes and does that. It's super taxing on your body. You're not going to, unless you taper for it and train for it, like you're not going to get an accurate result. It's super mentally challenging. Sounds awful. I've never done it except like in a race, but so I like to use the 20-minute test and then take 95% of the average power of that. Um, Now, I'm going to get into the weeds here. There are some people that are aerobic machines, and they create all most of their power using um, their aerobic system. And there are people that have a lot of anaerobic contributions. And so when we think about, we want to measure what your max aerobic output is over the course of time. So some people that have really high VO2 or really strong anaerobic power relative to their aerobic power could overtest in an FTP test. And the shorter the duration of test, so there are these like ramp tests or 8-minute tests, the shorter the test, the more inaccurate it's going to be if you have a really high anaerobic contribution. So 20 minutes feels like a nice balance where we're burning off a lot of that anaerobic contribution. We're estimating that it's 95% of that number is about what you could do for an hour. Honestly, I think it's an anchor point, but most people, if I said, okay, go ride for an hour at that 95% of FTP, they'd be like, there's no way I can do that. And that's why we don't ask you to do it.
Yeah.
But it's an anchor point. So I like the 20-minute test. There's also ramp tests and 8-minute tests, like I said. But at the end of the day, they're all estimates, and your FTP is going to change day to day. And so it's important that you recognize that it's simply an anchor point. It doesn't define you as a cyclist. It's going to change, and it should change. If you take a couple of weeks off, November, December, you take time off, your FTP will go down. And then as you start training, it will go up. And the newer you are to training, the more quickly it will increase. If you've been training for a really long time and you're very mature in your cycling, your FTP will not increase nearly as much. And so you'll see big gains initially if you're new to cycling, and then you'll be like, what am I doing wrong? My FTP is not going up the same way. It's like, that's because the curve is not linear.
Yeah.
Um, so that's just something to consider. Don't get frustrated if you've been training for 2 years. In the first year, you saw your FTP go up 40 points, and in the second year, you see it go up 5 points. And those are just examples, but that's very typical. And it's also really important to think about what type of events you're doing, because the FTP number, again, it's an anchor point for our training. And if your physiology is going to be different depending on the types of racing you're doing. So if you're a track racer and your events are really short versus you want to do Unbound 200, your FTP might be similar, but your strengths and your ability to execute in those races are going to be really different. So,
Yeah.
um,
Exactly. And I think a big thing with our winter training group, a lot of people are maybe doing their first FTP tests, and it's really hard to nail it the first time because you don't know how hard to go. So you might even go out way too hard, and then you're like, "Ooh, 5 minutes in, I can't hold that." Or you went
mhm,
way too easy, and you're like, you got to the end, and you were like,
mhm,
I had a lot more in the tank. So if like if you're working on a platform like a Zwift or Trainer, any of those, they'll have tests you could take.
mhm, mhm,
And don't be discouraged if you don't feel like you get it right the first time or the first few times, because you kind of have to get to know yourself as a rider to nail
mhm.
it.
And they do, it gets, the writing doesn't get easier, but the mental challenge of an FTP test does get easier the more you do it. Also, don't be afraid to say, wow, I really feel like I under tested today. I'm going to add a few watts and see how the program unfolds. Or the you set your FTP and you start the training program and you're like, oh, that's way too hard. And just dial it down a little bit. Like, you can manually adjust it. It's not something set in stone. I think the tendency is to over report FTP versus under report. And I would much rather say have someone keep it low, recognize that they can take on a little more load and then increase it versus the other way around. Um, and I also think training is testing and racing is testing. And so you might do a workout and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, I just did this over under workout and that was my best 20-minute power ever. Cool. That's rad. All right. So that in itself is a reflection of progress in training, and also an indicator to increase your FTP. And if you change your FTP, or if it increases or decreases, you need to remember to make sure you update it in Training Peaks and also Zwift, because all of those workouts are executed as a percentage of that number. So, and if you're using Zwift or Rovi or Training Peaks Virtual, those platforms all have something called a bias. And it's basically, if you're in a workout and you're like, oh, I'm in the third set of this tempo and I really feel like I should pick it up a notch, and you're using erg, you can hit up on the bias and it will increase the power a little bit. Or if the opposite's true, you can decrease it a little bit. So you can kind of micro adjust within a workout without actually changing your FTP. That might have gotten into the weeds. Sorry,
Yeah.
Catherine.
Well, it is, like some people are like, I'm not riding with anything. And some people are like using tools. And that was another thing I think I've seen in our training group is a lot of people are like, I actually know how to use all these tools for the first time, because we took a lot of
Mm,
time to help people get it set up and explain how everything connects and how you need to adjust this number here and there. And, like tools are
mhm.
great, but if you're not using them correctly, you're not getting the right inputs.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like anything, bad data in, bad data out. So you want to make sure that, and if you have, this happened at camp in Tucson recently. So if you have power pedals, so your power meter is built in your pedals, and you don't torque them to the specs, they will provide power data that is very wrong. So
Oh,
if you
interesting.
go for a ride and all of a sudden your training platform, say it's Training Peaks, is alerting you that you now have an FTP that just went up 100 watts, or you can go back and clean up that data. Like,
Something suspicious here.
so don't, yes, these tools are awesome, but sometimes our heart rate monitors go haywire. Sometimes our power meters don't listen. I have actually had two athletes in the last few months whose trainers have kind of decided to go start operating with a mind of their own. So sometimes it's important to question the data too. And that's why no one gets 100 extra watts on your FTP without, it just doesn't happen overnight. So if your data is telling you something like that, there's probably
Yeah.
something going on.
Yeah. You're probably not gonna have a massive jump over,
Yeah.
if you're testing it say you're testing it every month or 6 weeks, you're
Mhm.
probably not gonna have the most like a massive jump in that time. It's small increments. These
Yeah.
unless you're, like you said, coming from we used to do this all the time. The energy lab where I coached is, you'd have somebody come in brand new to cycling, and then they would just see these massive jumps, 50, 60 watts. And it was just because they, one, didn't know how to execute the test correctly the first time. And so they went way too conservative. And two, they got into training and started to see what it felt like. Um, cool. Okay, I'm looking at my sheet. Okay. Let's talk about people. So some people have been training like our group all winter. And some people are like, oh, the weather's just getting nice. I should get my bike, dust my bike off. I've got like an event. So let's say like an Unbound, or I'm doing Gorge Gravel in April, like I've got an event in April or May. How far out should I start a training plan for an event? And what do I do if I didn't start one?
And that's the case for so many people.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, winter is for skiing or water polo. We actually have an athlete in our Oregon Trail plan that's also a water polo. She's getting into water polo. Anyway, you're not alone if you haven't been riding your bike all winter, and now is the best time to start. So the first thing you want to do is just make sure that whether you're training indoors or outdoors, like your equipment is set up and safe. And sometimes you're like, today's the day I'm going to ride my bike. And then you go out there and both tires are flat and you haven't taken care of your drivetrain or whatever. So, first thing is just make sure you've got your equipment dialed in. And then what I would say is just start riding your bike. Um, if you can ride a couple hours this week and then a couple hours plus 10% next week, and just start, especially on those weekends when you have more time or if you have days off during the week, like pick one day that's your longer ride from a duration standpoint and just start adding 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there over the course of a few um, months. And all of a sudden you're doing a 3 hour ride when you started doing a 1 hour ride as your longer ride. And once you can confidently ride, you're like, okay, this is my schedule. I can ride 3 days a week. Um, I'm increasing the duration of rides. Maybe I'm getting some friends to go. And when I ride with friends, I'm going a little bit faster. Then I would say is the time to start looking for a progressive training plan. But initially, don't stress about it. Just say, I'm just going to ride my bike. I just want to make a goal to ride my bike 3 times this week. And once you create that habit and it's like, okay, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, I ride my bike. And then the people around you, your family and the people that you work with, and they're like, oh yeah, this is the day that Catherine rides her bike. It becomes habitual. And then when you integrate a training plan on top of that, you've already set aside the time. You've already carved out that schedule. And I would say that consistency is so much more important than doing one superhero workout a week.
Yeah.
So if you have the choice to ride, say you have 3 hours a week to ride, I would much rather see you ride 3 hours or 3 1 hour rides than one 3 hour ride. So think about consistency over duration, because especially if you're untrained, if you go out and try to smash a 4 or 5 hour bike ride, it's going to take you a week to recover, and you're not going to want to ride until the next weekend. So any fitness that you gained by smashing yourself was already like, you didn't actually gain anything because it took so long to recover.
Yeah.
So consistency is going to be more important than thinking that if I do one big ride a week, I'm going to
Yeah.
be a superhero.
And I think if you haven't done a lot of, if you have a base of fitness, you can actually get away with a lot more. Like if you're like, oh, I've got an event coming up, I'm not prepared. Like just go try it. Or maybe the event maybe you signed up for a 60 mile and you could drop to a 40 mile at the event, but
Mhm.
cycling is unique in that you might be really uncomfortable and it might really suck, but as long as you keep eating, you can actually get away with a lot more than you think you can, where like you can't,
Mhm.
some people can, but I would not be advisable. Like, I think I'm just going to go sign up for a marathon with no training because there's a lot more
Yeah.
risk to really injuring yourself with that kind of pounding on the
Mhm.
body. At the same time, there are events where you're going to be just very miserable. We talked about Oregon Trail last night. You're gonna be very miserable if you don't really put the prep in, and it's a
Mhm.
lot more fun to not feel smashed and miserable and not wanna talk to anybody after something
Mhm.
because you're just so dead and miserable. So, we talk a lot about training and also, like, sometimes you just gotta go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I like to say that, like, growth happens just outside your comfort zone. So if you're thinking, "Ah, the 40 miler is gonna be a stretch, but I could do it," I would say do it. But if you're thinking, "Oh, the 40 miler is gonna be a stretch," don't sign up for the 60,
Yeah.
right? Like, set big goals and you wanna push yourself, but you wanna push yourself in an achievable way. And, I know when I talk to athletes that get nervous about a big climb coming up, for instance. This race has this huge climb in it, and I'm really nervous about the climb. Okay, so what's the worst thing that could happen? The very worst thing. You could put your foot down, you could take a break, you could turn around and cruise back down the hill if you wanted to. So when we think about what's the worst thing that could happen, and with the caveat you don't have any sort of medical conditions, but
Yeah,
just
or, like, some crazy injury, your knee is
yeah, but if you're healthy and cleared to ride, and you're doing something that's scary, um, what's the worst thing that can happen? And I think when we let go of the fear around, oh, all these bad things could happen, we allow ourselves to just stay curious. And I would say that that's true both for the climbing and then also the descending. Descend within your speed of comfort, but recognize that if you do that, you're in control and you're going to be fine. So, and
yeah.
practice descending. I will say one of the things I was actually talking to my husband about this week is practicing some mixed terrain riding before you show up for your first gravel race or mountain bike race. Get on get on dirt. And even if it's a road race, like make sure that you remember how to ride outside. Can you grab your bottle? Can you get a snack out of your pocket while you're moving forward? Can you look over your shoulder and still ride in a straight line? And I think when we're riding inside on the trainer, sometimes those skills just get rusty. They don't take very long to reacquaint yourself with, but give
Yeah.
yourself a little bit of time to just practice.
Yeah. First group ride of the season's always like, "Oh, forgot to bring this, forgot that," all the
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I also wanted to ask you, how does somebody train for competition versus completion? So I am like, I want to have my PR at this event, or I really want to go for a podium spot versus like, I want to finish this event. And
Hmm.
and both are like a competition goal within yourself, right? But what if you're like, I really want to go see how hard I could go? What's the difference in that kind of training?
I think first of all, it starts with what your goals are, right? So if you're like, this is to finish this race is going to be a really awesome achievement for me, and your completion is your goal. My guess would be that your aerobic system is the focus. We really need to build the aerobic system because before you can compete, you have to complete. So that would be the first thing. So training for a completion ride is probably going to have a little less specificity and a little more endurance and durability training because we're not looking for peak power. We're looking to build your ability to ride for a longer duration of time. And then if you get into so that foundation is being laid. That doesn't mean that if you're training for completion, you're not doing intervals. You are 100% doing intervals. They're just going to look a little bit different. If you're racing to compete and you're like, this is my A race, the foundation of completion is already set because you have been training, you're a more mature rider, you have that aerobic foundation. So now we're going to start getting into more of the specificity of that particular race. We're going to talk about strategy. We're going to be doing efforts that are most likely more geared to the demands of group riding, of surging, of breakaways. Um, and so I think you could actually, it's really towards the pointy end and the specificity of that particular race and the ability to produce variable power versus constant steady power. Because if you're completing, we want you to have a more steady output over the course of the ride. Whereas if you're racing to win, you need to be able to sprint, cover attacks, um, surge up a hill, all those things.
Yeah, or even if you're looking for, like, your own PR, like, I've done the Unbound 100
Yeah,
3 times, and I
yeah,
wanna take an hour off my time this year,
right.
like, that's a different type of
I
training
love
than,
that,
like,
Catherine.
finishing it. Yeah, 'cause, you know, like, I think a lot of people, when they hear us talk about training and competing, they think, like, the people that are going for the podium, but people show up with a lot of different competition goals at
Hmm.
an event. Um, and we've been talking about what do we do after our winter training? Like, could we offer some continued training plans? Because we want to make training accessible for people. And I'll caveat this by saying I've had a coach a lot of times in my life. And if you can afford a coach for any goal, you should have that because it's just really great for somebody to know you, write your workouts, adapt your stuff. But I know that's not accessible for everybody. It's not the priority of what they can put financially into it. And so we were talking about it. I was like, well, we were like, how do we structure these? And one of the
Hmm.
things is like you were saying, well, that all depends on like your time goal. And I'm like, well, I think like if you're really going after that, if that's you, you really need to look to invest in a coach because no static program is going to give you
Hmm.
what a coach is
Hmm.
going to understand and give you and talk through all those. Well, exactly what we were saying. Like today, you're going to go out in this group ride and you're going to, simulate a hard start or any of those
Hmm.
things. So,
But I do think that for those who have a goal of completion, have a goal of bettering their time from the year before, have the goal of riding with their friend. I don't want to discredit the work that those people put in. It is huge.
oh,
I coach
absolutely.
athletes at like every spectrum, and they're all. I actually opened up one of my athletes' comments today, and my heart like did a flutter. It was awesome, and there is and this is someone who is she is training to complete an event, and she is doing the work, and it is just so incredible to see someone working so hard for their goal. So maybe the goal isn't to win, but for her it is she will win her race, and that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I say that, I'm not saying I don't think any goal, like I'm actually more of a completion athlete these days, and I've been on the competition side where I was like trying to hit a podium or something.
Yeah.
And I have a lot more fun training for completion than I did doing that, and it's where I am in my life and it's with all the other priorities I'm balancing
Yeah.
where I am. And maybe one day I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, I want to try to go see how hard I can go again
Yeah.
at an event. But now's not the
and
time.
and Catherine, I actually was, joking aside, like having joy as your why keeps you open to curiosity, and you all often surprise yourself because
Mhm.
you're unburdened by the weight of expectation, um, and you can just go have fun. And
Yeah,
joy
exactly.
is the new superpower.
Exactly. And I said this on a podcast a few weeks ago. There's a lot more joy crossing the finish line. There's not a lot of joy on the pro field crossing the finish line. There's a few people that are really joyful,
Mm.
and there's a lot of people that are really sad. But when you start to watch the people that are crossing mid, like I've been at the finish line when it's like 11 o'clock at night and I'm bound, and the joy I see in people that completed this really hard challenge, there's a lot more joy there. There
And
is.
they did something they didn't think they could do,
Yeah,
and they did it. And I agree, there is beauty at the pointy end of racing. It is amazing. But to your point, the people that are racing the sun, the people that are coming in at 11 o'clock, the heart that the work and the heart that they put into that, I think is what this community is really about.
yeah.
And um, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, we've been talking a long time, and we're gonna have to we're gonna maybe make this a regular segment because I think people are
Okay.
curious. But is there anything else you want folks to know? We're getting ready to hit March. So anything else you want people to know specifically about training or maybe thinking about
Mhm.
training this time of year before we go?
Two things. One, if you haven't started riding your bike or running or whatever it is that you love to do to get outside yet in 2026, today is the best day to start. And second, I challenge all of you, if you can, spend 1/2 hour, so 30 minutes that you otherwise would be riding your bike on the trainer or on a bike ride to work on some skills. Go to a local park, ride in circles, practice clipping in and out, drink while you're riding, get a snack out of your pocket. Um, the amount of confidence and speed that you'll have going into those early season races by just spending a half an hour a week working on riding skills is invaluable. So yeah.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I think I've mentioned before, some friends and I hired Serena to do a skills clinic for us. It
Mm,
was great. People loved the skills clinics that we did at mechanic camp. You taught people how to ride through
mm.
sand, how to ride through single track. I don't think they knew they were getting into that the day they
Uh-uh.
arrived. That was a fun surprise. And it was fun because the last day they went back and did it again, and people were rocking it
Yeah.
after just 3 days.
It was that was so cool. The
Yeah,
progression in 4 days is
yeah.
just like
And the writing was such a small part of the camp, right? Because they
mhm,
spent so much time on the mechanic stuff.
yeah.
Okay, remind folks how to find you if they wanna follow you, if
So
they're looking for coaching or any of those things.
yeah, you can find me Special Blend Gravel on Instagram at Special Blend Gravel, or my personal Instagram is Serena BG. And you can find all the information about Special Blend at specialblendgravel.com.
Cool, and then Serena is also gonna be racing the Mid-South Double, so
Yeah.
maybe next time when you come back, I wanna hear how you're balancing cycling and running because I think a lot more people are doing
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
I think that's a really fun
And on
conversation.
that note, we're trying to pull together a little coffee chat at Mid South on Thursday morning. So stay tuned for details on that so we can get the community together.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us. And if you have enjoyed this episode with Serena, send us questions that you would want to hear from her if we bring her back
Yeah.
as a regular.
Awesome. Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks.